Bava Metzia Daf Chava. The Gemara continues learning our last Mishnah, which talked about what happens if you find an object in a wall. The walls then were very thick, and there were many holes in them, and people would store things there. So you find an object. The Mishnah had said that if it's in the half close to Rosh Hashanah, to the outside, then it's hefker. You could assume that whoever left it there was from Rosh Hashanah. If it's on the inner half of the wall, then you could assume that it's a person who lives within the house. Now the Gemara quotes a statement of Rav Ashi that says it actually goes by where the handle is. So if it's a knife, whichever side the handle is facing, that's the side from which it was placed in there. So if the handle is facing to the outside, split it from Jisrael. If the handle is facing to the inside, it belongs to the person who owns the house. Same thing applies to a purse. It would be the side in which the straps are, because that's just like the handle. Someone says, how does that fit in the Mishnah? The Mishnah says it depends if it's on the inner half or the outer half. You're telling me it depends on where the handle is. So the Gemara says the Mishnah is referring to something that doesn't have a handle, like balls of cotton wool or a flat sheet of silver, which doesn't have any specific end from which it's traditionally held. Now, the Gemara says we have another halacha that if the wall was filled up from the objects that are within it, then the person who found it splits it with the person who owns the half. So Gemara says that should be obvious. It's filled up, so it's half on this side, it's half on the inner end and half on the outer end. Gemara explains we're referring to where the wall was slanted or leaning, or the hole was leaning, and you may think that it really came from the upper end and it slipped down to the lower end, and you should give it to whichever one is on the upper end. Kamashman that you don't say that. The Gemara now moves on to discuss the next halacha. The Mishnah had said that if the house itself had been rented to multiple individuals, then whoever finds it could keep it, because you don't know which of those individuals was the one who left it there, even though it is found in the inner half of the wall, and it definitely comes from one of them. So the Gemara asks, why do we not say that it belongs to the last one that was there? And the Gemara is going to show we have such halacha in which we assume if something is cleaned between everyone who uses it or between every event, like the house usually is, you should assume it belongs to the last one. The Gemara quotes from a Mishnah discussing money that was found in Yerushalayim. So the Mishnah divides Yerushalayim into three zones. The Harabayis, this is zone 1. In front of the stores where they sell animals for karbanos is zone 2, and the rest of Yerushalayim is zone 3. So in front of the stores where they sell animals for karbanos, you could always assume that the money that's there is Meiser Sheni money, because what people do is they bring the Meiser Sheni money to Yerushalayim, they use it to buy animals, they bring them as karbanos, and then they eat it in Yerushalayim as the halacha of Meiser Sheni is. Now, even though the people usually come at the time of the regal, the time of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, they don't manage to use up all the money there, and they give it to either poor people or relatives that live in Yerushalayim, and they buy karbanos with it. So the animals are always being sold to Meiser Sheni money, so the money that's there is Meiser Sheni money always. Now, Harabayis. So Harabayis is not cleaned out on a daily basis. The Harabayis was sloped, people didn't walk there with their shoes on, so it was generally clean, and therefore money that fell there could have fallen from any time of the year. Now, although on the regel, most of the money that's there comes from Meiser Sheni, the majority of the year, it is regular chulin money. Therefore, the money which you find in Harabayis, you could assume is chulin. Now, the rest of Yerushalayim is cleaned out every day. And therefore, you should assume that the money that's there came from that day. Therefore, if it's during the regal, you assume that it's Meiser Sheni money, because most of the money in Yerushalayim during the regal is Meiser Sheni. And if it's the rest of the year, you should assume that it is chulin. But we see from here, from the case of Yerushalayim, the rest of the streets, that if something is generally clean, you could assume that it's from that day. You assume it's from the most recent status of who and when and what is used for. So the same thing should apply if you find money in the wall of a house where it's rented to multiple individuals. You should assume it's from the last one, because everyone who left, when he moved out, he cleaned out all the things that he has. So my answer is that, okay, the case here must be that there were 3 people that are renting it at once. It was like a hotel. It was rented to 3 Yisraelim. The question of the Girsa is Yisrael or just Adam. Then therefore it was 3. And whoever owned it understands there's a lot of people there. Somebody must have taken it, and therefore I'm not going to get it back. So it says, aha. So you see that the halacha, the reason here why you have to assume that there's is just because it's like a rabbim. It's like a lot of people there on the person's meyayish. That's what Shimon ben Elazar's halacha. We said on the last daf that in a place where there's a rabbim, your meyayish, that's what Shimon ben Elazar who said that. And we're saying here, even in the case of Rav Yisrael. Now, if the Girsa was Rav Yisrael, the proof is simple. Even if the Girsa is not Rav Yisrael, the fact that we're not machalik between whether it's Rav Yisrael or Rav Chavim shows that this is true even if it was Rav Yisrael. So you see, Rishon ben Elazar should say is halacha, and halacha is like him. Even in the case of Rav Yisrael, the people are miyayish. So Gemara answers, no, not necessarily. Rav Menashe Bar Yaakov says it could be referring to where it was rented out. This hotel was rented out to Eved Kechavim. Rashi says even one Eved Kechavim is enough to make him be miyayish. Another answer of Nachman says the name of Rabba Bar Avuha, even if it's through Yisrael, here is different. Maybe really the halacha is not like Shimon ben Elazar, or he doesn't even say his halacha in the case of Rav Yisrael. But here, the person who owns it knows that I haven't gotten it back yet, and they know that it was just me and one other person who was here. Obviously not planning on returning it, planning on holding on to it. Otherwise, he would have returned it already. However, in the classic case of Rav Yisrael, he would assume that somebody will return it to him. Now, says the Gemara, Rav Nachman said this halacha shows the same concept in a different situation, where he says that if someone sees two people walking together and one of them drops a coin, so he's chayiv to return it because that person's not miyayish, because he understands that if he lost it, the other one who's with him must have found it, and therefore he's going to go to him and he'll get it out of him. Even if he hasn't returned it, the person's not miyayish, because this is the only other person who's with me, he must be the one who found it. Rashi says to force him means that he'll demand that he swear that he didn't find it, he's going to deny that he found it, therefore he's not miyayish. Now, if though you have three people walking together, one of them loses a coin, then the person's probably miyayish because he realizes, and this is what parallels what we said here, he realizes either of these two people who are with me could be the ones who have found it, and I can't make either of them swear because each one will say it wasn't me who found it. Therefore, I'll not be able to force it out of either of them, and since he hasn't returned it to me yet, he's obviously planning on stealing it and keeping it for himself, and therefore he is miyayish. Now, on that, Rava says that's only true if the value here is not equal enough of a shavar pruta for each person who's there. Because if there's, let's say, three people and the coin is worth 3 prutas, could be that they're all partners in it. And therefore, he's not miyayish because he knows that my partner found it. Now, some versions say that Rava goes even further and says, even if there's only 2 prutas, so that means that 2 of them are partners, and the third one may have been a partner, and he's meichel his amount. And therefore, maybe they really do trust each other, and there's no yish because they're all on the same page. Rava says further, there are 3 surim involved with somebody who does not return a lost object. First of all, there's lesigzo. If he, at the time that he picks it up, he could be stealing if he was chayav to return it and he takes it with intent to steal it. Then there's another isur leisuchal asalim, which is you should not pretend you didn't see something and not return it. That means you should not avoid saving the person's money for him. That's if he wasn't miyayish and you could return it and you don't. That's applicable even after the time at which you saw it. And then there's Hashiv Teshivim that says actually go and return it. If you picked it up with intent to return it, but you never actually did, then there's a Hashiv Teshivim Isser. So Rava says you could have 1, 2, or all 3 of these applying. So for example, if somebody sees a coin that dropped from someone, so he knows whose it is, and he sees that, and right away before that person is miyayish, the instant he drops it, he picks it up with intent to steal it and keep it. So he violates all 3. He's stealing it because the person wasn't miyayish yet. At the time that he picks it up, he has intent to keep it for himself. He violates Hashiv Teshivim because he's not going to actually return it. And he violates Leisuchal Asalim because he's not helping the person get his money back. Now, if he later changes his mind and decides to actually return it, he is not taking these Isurim off. He's giving the person a gift now. The person's already miyayish, so it's not even his, but he's giving him a gift. But he has not resolved these Isurim. Now, if, however, he took it before Yesh, but he was intending to return it, so the time he picked it up, there's no Lesigzo. So Lesigzo is not Negei here. But once he picked it up, and then after the person's miyayish, he decides, you know what, now I'm going to keep it. So now he's violating Hashiv Teshivim, because he picked it up with intent to return it, and he never actually returned it. Now, if he waited to pick it up until he saw that the owner was miyayish, he waited until he checked the pocket, he saw that the owner was miyayish, and then he took it, then he violates Leisuchal Asalim because he could have been in a situation where there's a chiyuv to return it, and he purposely missed it. Says Rava further, somebody who sees that somebody dropped a coin between the sands, and then he finds it and he keeps it for himself, he does not have to return it, because the person who drops it says that I'm not going to be able to get it back from between the sands. Even though he sees someone sifting through the sand with a sifter, he says, no, just like I dropped something between the sands, someone else may have, and therefore he's not going to get it back. Now we get our next Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses money that was found in a shop. It refers to two kinds, either a store where people sell things. So there's a counter in front of the shopkeeper, and he puts products on the counter, and he takes money that's placed on the counter, and he puts it in his register, which is in the counter. Or you could have a money changer who has a similar scenario, except he has a table in which money is exchanged on the table itself. The Gemara refers to the counter of the store as a teva, and the table of the shulchani as a kisei. So the halacha here in these two cases is very similar. If it's found anywhere in the store or in the shop, except for between the storekeeper, the shopkeeper, or the money changer, meaning between the proprietor and the counter, anywhere else in the store is considered to be hefker, tzarei l'shalai. The person who lost it is mashed because there are many people that come in and out of the store, and therefore he doesn't dream of getting it back. However, if it's between the storekeeper, the shopkeeper, the proprietor, and the counter, it's definitely dropped from him. No one else goes there, and therefore you do have to return it. And it's returned to him. The next case the Mishnah says is if you purchase fruits from someone, or someone sends you a container of fruits, and you find money in it. So if it's just regular money that's open, you're allowed to keep it. However, if it is bound up in something, then you have to return it. The Gemara will explain what the difference is. Now, the Gemara focuses on a difference in language in the case of the store and the case of the money changer. So in describing the items you're allowed to keep, so in the case of the store, it says anywhere in the store, it says in the store. In the case of the money changer, it says in front of the money changer. So what's the difference in that? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar is medayik, what happens if it's found on the table itself? So in the case of the money changer, he says that is the same as the rest of the store, and on the table itself, you would be allowed to keep just like anywhere else. Now the Gemara wants to say on its own that the Gemara is not impressed by that. The Gemara says you could be medayik either way. It says in front of the money changer. The Gemara assumes that means on the floor in front of the money changer. The Gemara is a medayik that on the table you should have to return. And then it says between the money changer and the table you have to return. You should be medayik from that. And on the table itself you're allowed to keep. So the Gemara says the D could go either way. But Rabbi Elazar compared shulchani techenvini, the store, to the money changer, and that's where he found the source that there should be a different halacha there. Okay, the Gemara concludes its comments on the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that if you get sent fruits, then if it is unwrapped, if it is not put in a bag, you're allowed to keep them. If you find money inside the fruits or inside the basket of the fruits, the Gemara says that Rish Lakish says in Rav Yana, it's talking about where the fruits were being sent from a merchant, and therefore he could have gotten it from a supplier. In that condition, you don't know whose it is, and therefore there's yish. But if you bought it from a private individual, it's his. The Gemara says that a teacher of Brisa said over the same halacha of Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman asked, but if it's private, it's also not the owner who did the threshing of it. It was probably one of his workers who did. So he still doesn't know if it belongs to the owner or the workers. So the Brisa, the teacher said, so should I take this Brisa out because it's not correct? There shouldn't be a difference between a merchant and a private owner. So Gemara said, no. Say that the case is, he answered, that Rav Nachman answered, say that the case is where the owner had only workers that were avodim and shivchos kenanim, and therefore, even if they find it, it belongs to the owner, and therefore it most definitely belongs to the owner. You don't have to worry about returning it to someone else.